It's time for our year-end review and predictions show. Ted is here to review our predictions from last year, and we'll give you our predictions for 2021 starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Well, Ted, our predictions for 2020 were not even close.
But nowhere near.
Last December, we sat in this very studio, and we both looked at the data. And you and I saw that bankruptcies and consumer proposals were on the rise in 2019. You remember that?
Right. Yep.
Debt levels were going up. Non-mortgage delinquencies had been rising steadily since the end of 2018. So we both said, hey, trend in motion will continue. So we both predicted an increase in personal insolvencies. You said they would probably go up by 10%. I was much more pessimistic. I said, they're probably going to go up by 20%. So what happened? Let's look at the numbers, shall we? In January 2020 in Ontario, personal insolvencies were up by 17.5%. Pretty good prediction on my part. February, they were up by 16.5%. Looking pretty good. Then, you remember what happened in March? The big lockdown. And as a result, personal insolvencies were basically flat that month, actually down a couple of points. April, they were down 36%. The economy was shut down at that point. May, they fell by 44%. And again, we're comparing the month of May this year to last year.
Right.
That was the biggest drop during the year, and so it went for the rest of the year. So we will probably end the year somewhere in the range of a drop of 25%.
Sounds right.
Completely the opposite of what we predicted.
Right.
Now, you and I know what happened.
So does everyone listening to this program.
So does everyone. There's no surprises in what I am about to say. The
Right.
economy locked down. 9 million Canadians got CERB. So first question for you, and all our frequent listeners are going to know the answer to this. So this is a bit of a softball. If no one was working, why didn't the personal insolvency rate go up? And in particular, given the fact that the debt to income ratio is 180%. So why did personal insolvencies not skyrocket?
Well, lots of people make this mistake all the time. The folks that file bankruptcy and consumer proposals are the folks that are working. So with the lockdown, people aren't working. The courts were closed, collection activity stopped, unemployment peaked at somewhere just a little short of 14% in May. If you're not working, there are no wages to garnish, so there's no one pushing you to declare yourself to be insolvent.
Absolutely right. And so even though consumer insolvencies year over year had increased for 17 straight months
Right.
before we got to the lockdown, they then collapsed to levels we haven't seen for 20 years. Now, here's another amazing stat. The personal savings rate, which is the percentage of our disposable income that we saved, historically, if you go back over the last few years, it's been pretty close to nothing.
Right.
1 to 3% kind of a thing. And yet in the second quarter of 2020, it hit an all-time high of over 28%. So what happened, and is that not good news that we were saving all that money?
Yeah, it's not really good news. People spend based on their expectation of what's going to happen to them next week, next month. And at the start of the pandemic, the expectation was nothing was going to happen. The world was closed, so they just stopped spending on everything. If you don't know what you're going to do, then you keep all your eggs still in the basket.
Yeah, and so the high savings rate was more a function of we're worried.
People being afraid.
Being afraid of what's happening. And I believe that's called the permanent income hypothesis, which, of course, we all studied in economic school.
Of course we did.
Now, let's talk about CERB, which has been a massive topic.
Mm-hmm.
Between March 15th and October 3rd, eligible Canadians received $2,000 every 4 weeks. 9 million Canadians received CERB. That's 1 in 3 adults. There was also the CEWS, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which we estimate, and these are based on our own numbers here, has flowed through to 6 million employees. So this is a wage subsidy given to employers to keep their workers on.
Yep.
Presumably they weren't getting CERB at the same time, although obviously there were some people who would have got both during different time periods. But by our calculation, that means about 1/2 of all adult Canadians received some amount of income support from the federal government during the pandemic. So what is the implication of that? What is on your cue card, Ted Michalos?
Well, so my cue card tells me that household income grew by 11% in the second quarter, even though employment earnings dropped by 20%.
So household income growing sounds good. What's the problem here?
Well, like any time you're looking at statistics and you're talking about things that are medians or averages, they don't tell the true story. And nobody actually earns the average income. So you either earn less than or more than. And in fact, more people earn less than, and the higher incomes bring it up. So it's the average income increasing by 11% doesn't properly reflect what was happening to the average person.
Yeah, it's like the old saying. So would you be comfortable walking across a river if you know that on average it's 3 feet deep?
Right.
Well, if it's 10 feet deep in one spot and 1 foot at the other, then no. Which
you probably have a problem with that.
Yeah, an average is kind of a meaningless number. So when we look at the numbers, what we see is that the high income earners tended to do okay.
Yep.
The lower income earners also tended to do okay because they were the ones who were getting their income replaced with CERB. It's the people in the middle who kind of got creamed. So explain to me, why were the high income earners in general fine?
Well, so the high income earners were often, they're either professional or technical people. They can respond the quickest to this sort of thing. So if the skill set you use for work is something that you can take anywhere, all you got to do is move your computer home and you can start working again. People can still purchase your services. You can provide the same level of skill, the same level of expertise. We fall into that category. We just kept working even though we sent all our employees home.
Right. And as we record this a couple of days before Christmas here, we are in our head office in Kitchener, which is essentially empty.
Right. With you and me and the fellow who was holding the video camera.
Sean working the cameras, and that was it. So all of our other 23 offices have been closed since the pandemic started.
And all of our hundreds of employees are home.
They're all working from home, but they're still able to work. And so if you were an office worker, then this actually might have worked out okay for you because I'm not having to pay for transit and parking and maybe even daycare. If my paycheck continues, I'm doing good.
Right.
Now let's look at the opposite end of that, which is the person at the lower end of it. So do the math for me. You know, I'm a minimum wage worker before this started.
Yep.
What did my world look like then? What did it look like when I was on CERB?
So you're making $14 an hour. You work a 35-hour week. Your paycheck before any deductions is just under $2,000 a month. And I'm sure that's where they came up with CERB. I mean, the reality, of course, is that somebody working, their paycheck isn't $2,000. It's probably closer to $1,500 maybe. So because of taxes, CERB didn't have any taxes coming off. So in fact, the lowest echelon members of our society probably felt enhanced. Their income was higher because of CERB because they didn't set aside the money for the taxes. But that's another program too, right?
But yes, we have certainly addressed that issue on more than one occasion.
Yep.
You're right. CERB is taxable. So when you file your taxes for 2020, you're going to end up owing taxes on that probably.
Yep.
But you're right. In April, May, June, July, I was getting $2,000 a month into my bank account. And if I was a minimum wage worker beforehand, maybe I was only getting $1,500, $1,600, $1,700, $1,800 a month.
And your expenses were lower. Same example you gave for the office workers. I'm not commuting. I don't need to get ready for work, any of that sort of stuff. So, I mean, a number of people, their anxiety and stress level was higher, but financially they may have been better off.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. We are talking purely about the numbers here.
That's right.
This has been devastating for everybody, regardless of what the numbers are, not knowing if I'm going to have a job to come back to, which is obviously a serious problem. But what we're talking about is purely the numbers.
Right.
So now let's talk about the person in the middle then.
Yep.
So our average client earns around, and these are gross income numbers, $771 a week. 2/3 of our clients are somewhere between $500 and $1,200 a week.
Right.
And these wages have not come back to pre-pandemic levels. Give me an example, paint the picture for me of somebody in the middle. Maybe it's somebody who was bringing in, let's say, $3,000 a month before the pandemic. Who is that person? What kind of job did they have? What were they doing?
So a lot of these people are service workers. They have to interact with individuals. Think of the person working at the hair salon or somebody working at a restaurant, the server, or even some of the cooks if they're not providing the takeout service. Think of people in an office that hasn't been deemed essential, or for companies that didn't have the resources to be able to send computers home to redeploy so people could keep working. Some of these folks qualified for EI, but if you are used to earning $3,000 a month, this $771 per week, and you're suddenly on the max EI, which is $2,000, you got a problem on your hands. Yeah. And almost all of those people turned to credit. So they ran up their debts, lines of credit, credit cards, whatever they had to do because you had to pay your bills. Now, there was some savings grace, and we're going to talk about that next, the deferrals.
Right. And the deferrals did help certain segments of the population. So we are going to talk about that. So the key point, though, is if I was bringing in $3,000 a month and now I'm bringing in $2,000, I'm clearly worse off.
Right.
Even though maybe I don't have to pay for gas for the car or whatever, I'm still worse off. And that's the segment of the population that got hammered by this.
And it's a huge segment of the population. So the people at the bottom were looked after fairly well. The people at the top didn't need as much looking after. The people in the middle, as in all things, are the ones that are suffering.
Yeah, and if you're to draw a bell curve, which I'm just drawing here in the air,
we could get some lipstick.
That's
and put
right.
it on the
It's
screen.
the middle where most
where
of
the
the
people
people
are.
are, and that's why they got into trouble. So you raised the issue of deferrals. Let's talk about that. So we all know what a deferral is. The bank said, hey, you don't have to make your payment this month. We're going to tack it on to the end.
Yeah, but I'm not sure everybody knows what a deferral is. Deferral doesn't mean that they're forgiving the payment. You're still getting charged interest. That's what most people didn't realize, right? The deferral was, you don't have to pay us today. You still got to pay us, and we're going to charge you for not paying us now, but it improved your cash flow.
Right. And so instead of your principal coming down each month with a payment because you're not making a payment, your principal stays the same, but now we're tacking interest on it, so your principal is actually going up.
Sorry, didn't mean to distract you, but the deferrals bothered me.
And it's an important point. And the biggest dollar values of deferrals, of course, are mortgages, because those are the biggest types of debt. And so there were lots of mortgage lenders who said, yeah, we will let you not pay for 2 months, 3 months, I think even up to 6 months.
I think it was 6.
So why was that not something that helped the people in the middle?
Well, again, so from a cash flow perspective, it certainly took some of the pressure off, because the average mortgage payment deferred was $1,300. All right, well, so if your pay has gone from $3,000, now you're on EI at $2,000, that deferral could make the difference. But again, so if you weren't paying that $1,300 every month for 6 months, they added it to your principal. That means at the end of the 6 months, they added $10,000 to your mortgage. But wait, there's more. They added the interest for each one of those months on that, and it compounds. So that $10,000 deferral probably costs the average Canadian $20,000 to $25,000
over the
life of the mortgage.
Over the life of the mortgage. And again, it all depends on how much longer your mortgage is. If you're paying it off next week, then it won't be significant. And of course, the whole point of a mortgage deferral is you own a home.
Right.
If you're not a homeowner, then you don't get a
Didn't help you at all because you didn't get a rent deferral.
Right. Now, obviously, yes, we understand there were deferrals on credit cards and lines of credit and other things. But again, the people who owned a home ended up having a better cash flow during the pandemic because, hey, I don't have to pay my mortgage.
Right.
Now, we know that only about 5% of our clients are homeowners. In other words, over the last year or 2 or 3, people who come in here and file a bankruptcy or a consumer proposal, for the most part, aren't homeowners.
Right.
And not really hard to figure that out. Real estate prices have been going up. So if you had other debt, well, my house price went up, I could sell it, I could remortgage, whatever.
Yep.
So again, it's not the homeowners who are our clients. Yeah. Those are the people who tend to be at the upper end.
It's not that top sequence of people we were talking about earlier, the higher income earners that could adjust.
So we're going to talk predictions. Which we did so well at last
I don't really
year.
want to talk predictions.
But we got to do it because,
that's why people are listening.
That's what people are paying the big bucks for this show. Before we do that, let's talk about debt, because insolvency historically has always flowed from debt. What do you see happening with debt going forward?
Well, okay, so we've already seen some of it. I'm not aware of any deferrals continuing anymore. So the mortgage deferrals have stopped. The car loan deferrals stopped a month or 2 ago. And the credit card companies are actually now starting to call people to say, okay, can we still help you with this? But we want you to make a payment. And so all of these things that people put in place in the initial response are starting to disappear. On top of that, we know that CERB is over now. The government's replaced it with a new benefit. What's it?
CRB / EI.
Which is a lower benefit. And so that the bottom tier of our society that was benefiting from CERB is now getting less money to begin with.
Yeah, and when we say it's a lower benefit, it's still $2,000 a month, but
it's taxed.
They're taking taxes off.
So it's the benefit everybody should have received from CERB, but people haven't adjusted properly.
Yeah, so you're maybe getting $1,800 a month instead of $2,000 a month or whatever the numbers are. Yep. So clearly from a cash flow point of view, there is less coming in.
Right. The world's gone crazy because we've now got at least 2 vaccines that are approved in Canada, but you can't get them, and nobody's expecting to get them anytime soon, which means These lockdowns, like the one we're about to experience through the holiday season, are just going to get worse. They're going to repeat. And so nobody knows when they're going back to work full time. Nobody knows when the world is going to become normal.
Yeah, and that kind of cycles back to what you had said at the beginning, that if people aren't expecting to go to work, because it's not just am I working or not, it's what's my expectation.
That's right.
And so right now, I'm sitting here during the Christmas holidays, the New Year's time, and I'm going, well, we're in lockdown all throughout Ontario.
Right.
We're going to be probably for most of January.
Yeah, 2 to 4 weeks.
The vaccine is gradually coming out, but it's not like we're all going to be vaccinated in January.
Right.
I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know what its effectiveness is going to be. You've got to have 2 shots apparently. So we're looking at what? The end of the summer probably. Before a significant number of people have been vaccinated. At what point am I going to want to go sit in a restaurant again?
Maybe never. But more importantly, so the people that are working, so they're afraid of what's going to happen, so they don't spend. So the service industries that need that desperate support, I'm not going to spend my dollar on that because I don't know if I'm going to have it next month. So it's a ripple effect. The whole fear is such a pervasive problem with the economy. And once you're afraid that you're not going to have a paycheck next week, you stop spending money on everything, which is a self-creating problem, right? It fulfills the...
Right, which is... Yeah, it's as
a ripple
simple
effect.
as that. It's a ripple effect. So that makes it very difficult to figure out what's going to happen in the future. And the other segment of the economy we haven't talked about is the real estate market,
right?
Which has done very well in most spots in Canada over the last few years. And amazingly enough, well, not amazingly at all, it's quite easy to understand. The condo market right in downtown Toronto has, gotten hammered since the pandemic, because the only reason I'm living in this 500 square foot condo is so that I can walk to that office tower where I work. But now that I'm working remotely, I can move back in with my parents in London or Owen Sound or wherever and work from there. I don't need that condo. Airbnb has been essentially shut down. That was 20,000 units in the downtown core. So not much happening there, but people are moving to the outskirts, so real estate prices everywhere other than the downtown core have gone up.
Depending on where your house is.
Yep. It was a luck of the draw thing. So people are still seeing real estate prices going up, which gives them a bit of hope for the future. Oh, well, at least my house has gone up in value. But how long is that going to last for?
Yeah. I'm convinced that the 1 out of 20 people that we help that are homeowners is going to increase dramatically. I mean, I remember back, 10 or 11 years ago when it was 1 in 3 of our clients. 2011,
we were just over a third of our clients owned a home at the time they filed with us.
And now we're 1 out of 20. So I think it's going to go back the other way because people are overspending because they're being forced to. I mean, they see the market and they think, well, real estate can't go wrong. Yes, it can, but that's a different show.
Well, and again, if you owned a condo in downtown Toronto, then it has gone down. There's certainly a precedent for it. So what happens if we have good news, we do have the vaccine, people do begin returning to the office towers? Because I don't think the big employers who have these massive office towers are just going to say, oh, well, we just will never occupy them again. And people want to be back to work. They want to be able to go out for lunch and have a coffee and have a drink after work. And
they want to be able to separate their home life from their work life. If you're working at the kitchen table and then your workday ends and you're still at that same kitchen table, there's not enough of a difference.
Yeah, so I think there is some impetus to go back, which means all those people who thought, hey, living in Barrie is great, it's like, well, it is unless I have to commute to Toronto 2 or 3 days a week, even if I can work from home part-time.
Right.
So I think those prices probably start to ease off. So, okay, again, we have no idea what's going to happen, but it's still prediction time. So last year, we were completely wrong. We did not predict the pandemic. So this year, we get to redeem ourselves and give our prediction for this year. So you go first. Tell me and tell all the millions of listeners out there in Radio Land what is going to happen with insolvency rates in 2021.
So I got no prediction for 2021 because until we know that people are back to work, until we know that the government is actively collecting, that the courts are working at full capacity, there's not going to be any pressure on the people with debt. Debt levels are rising, so I know insolvency rates are going to increase, but I can't tell you when. There's just too much instability. There's too much uncertainty for me to reasonably tell you what's going to happen.
So at least next year when we play the clip, we can say, well, I mean, Ted said it was going to be volatile and uncertain, and he was right. So there you go.
That's what I'm playing to my, that's right.
Yeah, so...
Right.
And I agree with you. Of course, anybody who tells you what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone for a whole year, they're making stuff up. Nobody really knows. But I will give you my guesses here. So and you already hit the nail on the head that what we really need to know is, when does the economy open up?
Right.
Because that's what determines when people have wages that can be garnished, they're back to work, collection activity
How
picks
close
up.
to normal does the world have to get for the things to become normal?
And that's the million-dollar question. Right. So I think everybody agrees there is going to be a spike in coronavirus cases in January, because even though there's lockdowns happening, people will still get together with people over Christmas, over New Year's, whatever. So there will be heavy lockdowns in January. Hopefully they start to ease up in February. The government, we talked about the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy.
Yep.
It was 75% of wages for people who are still working, up to a maximum of, I think, a salary of like $55,000 a year or something. Well, that percentage has been declining.
Right.
We are now somewhere, I think, 55%. It's scheduled to continue going down. So it would not surprise me if in January there are some businesses that go, you know what, the holiday season is over. We're in lockdown. The government is only covering half of our wages, not 3/4. You know what? We need another round of layoffs.
Right.
So I think that's and I don't think that's been reported in the media, but that would be another prediction that is not a good thing. I can see the unemployment rate spiking up January, February, March. So hopefully that means February, early March is kind of the low point.
As bad as it's going to be. Yep.
Yeah, as bad as it is going to be, the peak cases and whatever. But hopefully from there, the vaccine starts to be implemented. And obviously it's going to be healthcare workers getting it first, as they should, and people who are at risk. But hopefully that starts to have a little bit of an effect, and we get the warmer weather that comes here, March, April, that starts to improve things as well. And so the inflection point probably happens somewhere around April for a few different reasons. Well, the economy getting a little bit better, the health crisis hopefully easing off, and you already addressed this, tax season.
Right.
Because there will be 9 million people who got CERB who have to put that on their taxes. And so when they file their taxes in March or April, there's going to be a bunch of people going, uh-oh, I got a problem. And how big is the problem? If I got $10,000 in CERB, I guess 14 or 18 or something, I forget what the maximum number was. But if I got 10,000, how big of a problem do I have?
It's $400 or $500 a month at least for every month you got it. So if you were on it for 5 months, you're going to owe somewhere between $2,000 and $2,500 in your taxes. And
it's all based on your marginal tax rate. So if you happen to be in the 50% rate for the year because you made a huge amount of money early or late in the year, then you're paying even more. So I think that will probably be the final trigger where people are back to work. They're getting the collection calls now, and they've got wages that can be garnished. The courts are reopening. And even if the courts don't reopen to in-person people, you know this yourself because you were in court last week, in bankruptcy court.
That's right. It's all being done virtually now.
Sitting in your office across the hall here, doing it over Zoom. So the courts will open up. And so that's probably why we will start to see an increase in the personal insolvency rate April, May, June. I think the summer will probably be a lot busier than other summers.
Yep.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I can buy into all of that. I mean, you're still not actually predicting the
insolvency. I know, that's pretty good, eh?
There were no numbers.
I talked for like 15 minutes straight. I give you a monologue and didn't give you a number.
Right.
Because who knows?
We don't know.
Right? Like, who knows? If I'm right and things start to pick up in April, then it could be that the insolvency rate for the year ends up being roughly flat. Because it's down for,
so once things get back to normal, because this 2020 was so low, I mean, it's going to look like we're having increases of 35 and 40%. But what you're about to say is for 6 or 7 months of the year, so that averages out to a lower number. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, January and February of 2020 were still big numbers.
Right, 16, 17% each month.
Right. So quite obviously, we're going to see a big drop in January and February of 2021 as compared to 2020. But once we get into April, where the numbers were really low in 2020,
it's going to be flat.
It's going to be flat. And then I think the big spike happens in the last 6 months of the year. So
I agree.
What does that average out to? I don't know. I mean, I think we will see an increase overall for the year, and it could be a pretty big increase if the economy gets back to work quickly. or not if it doesn't. And that's the bizarre thing.
Right.
The sooner the economy gets back, the sooner insolvencies pick up.
Yeah. So the cure is going to hurt.
The cure is going to hurt. Yep.
A lot of people.
But it is what it is. And again, that's why we do this show. We like people to understand the entire picture. And you can go to our YouTube channel and see the links to everything we've put here. You can go to Hoyes.com. We've got blog posts that detail all the numbers that we've talked about today, and they are all there. Any final comments you would like to make? This is your last few sentences for the year 2020. Anything else you would like to comment on?
No, just stay healthy and safe, people. We'll get through this together.
And that's more important than the numbers.
That's exactly right.
Ted, thanks very much. That is our show for today, and it's our last show for 2020, a year I suspect that most of us will want to forget. If you want links to everything we talked about today, if you want to see our work, please go to YouTube, and in the show notes, we've got links to everything. You can also go to Hoyes.com and check out our blog where we've posted a lot of charts that demonstrate very visually what we've been talking about today. And if you're watching on YouTube, it would really help get the word out if you would click the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you're notified of every new video we post. And comments and ratings on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your audio podcasts are much appreciated. Scott Theriault is back for the next show, or the first show of 2021 next week. So until then, thanks for listening. I'm Doug Hoyes for Ted Michalos. That was Debt Free in 30.